Hey everybody, Icy Cat here. A lot of the content additions we've seen under the headgear entries have been of the more silly variety lately. Now, if you've been looking for some more realistic additions to the game, do you have anything to hope for? We're going to talk about that next. The last couple of weeks have seen some new additions to the headgear lineup for Rainbow Six Siege that have been, frankly, on the sillier side of the spectrum. In very short order from one another, we had the Brazilian operator masks that came out with the very brightly colored berets and the very brightly colored masks to go with it. We also had the luchador wrestling masks come out, and those were for Twitch and Caveira. And a lot of people were kind of scratching their heads on that one. Probably the most egregious of all these, though, was the clown bundle pack of headgears that came out. This made goofy carnival circus faces for IQ, Sledge, Castle, Glaz, and Rook. The most recent of all these, though, was the wrestling masks, and when those came out within 24 hours of that content being dropped, there was a pretty vocal reaction in the subreddit. Now, as some of you may know, I am one of the moderators on the official Rainbow Six subreddit, so I get to see a lot of this content firsthand. I'm browsing the threads and comments on a regular basis. There was probably a good 5 or 6 that really were kind of major threads. These got anywhere from 200 to 300 comment upvotes all the way up to like 700 plus upvotes. Now, when you have that kind of community response on a single thread in response to something that has been done in-game, Ubisoft notices this. They have posted about how the dev team is pretty involved in watching what's going on in the Reddit. They may not necessarily post all the time, but they read what's going on, they're aware of it, and they do respond to it internally, even if they don't necessarily share that feedback on the actual Reddit itself. One person who does, though, is the Rainbow Six community manager. It's Epi. And here he makes a comment acknowledging that this has been going on, and he talks about how they actually had a meeting regarding this. What the outcome of that meeting is, of course, we don't know, but it does show that the community outcry was enough to generate some kind of an internal discussion on the matter. Later on, we see the community manager also asking for ideas from the community. They're kind of talking about it internally, and somebody must be saying, like, well, what do they want to see? And so he comes and he puts this request out to the community saying, share it with us. Let us know what kind of ideas, you have of the types of things you'd like to see in regards to realistic headgears. The response to that was huge. People had no problem providing pictures of the kinds of examples of things they'd like to see in the game. Now, at the end of the day, what does any of this translate into? I mean, we really don't have any way of knowing. When you have hundreds, and when you put them all together, thousands of people commenting and upvoting and turning this into a topic of discussion, saying, hey, wait a minute, there's been way too many silly things, we need to see some more realistic things, it gets noticed. Now, I've talked about weapon skins and headgears on my channel before. I don't think that too many of you that follow me regularly will be surprised by the fact that I am a fan of the realistic content. I don't like the silly skins, whether it's on a weapon or whether it's on a headgear. That's just my personal preference. I'm not going to knock it for those of you that do like that. I recognize there's people out there that love the silly stuff. They're all about the craziest colors and the funkiest patterns and whatever they want to put on their guns and their headgear. They're all about that. I mean, clearly Ubisoft has already set the precedent that they're okay with seeing silly stuff in the game. So we accept that. My big problem comes with the imbalance of realism to silliness. So, okay, there's people out there that like the skull faces and the cartoon things and the clown masks and whatever. That's okay, that's in there, that's fine. But few and far between are the examples we can point to for the realistic tactical gear. One of my favorite examples of this is the gray beret that you can get as an option for Ash. This is a really cool headgear. It keeps in with the military kind of theme. It's actually a uniform beret from one of the Israeli CTU teams. Even though Ash is part of the American FBI CTU, she is Israeli, and this sort of makes a nod back to that cultural heritage of hers. So seeing something that actually has like a realistic military uniform component to it available as a headgear is something I'm definitely a fan of. And it just looks badass on her too. I love it. But how many other options are there like that in the game? There's just not very many. And if you search tactical military headgear online or special forces headgear or helmets or things like that, there's so many things out there that you can find. Now, of course, there is the whole if you don't like it, you don't have to buy it argument. But the problem with that logic is even if I don't like it and I don't buy it, I do still have to see it. I'll see the clown masks in my kill cam, in the replay cam. I'll see it in the winner's gallery lineup at the end of a match. If somebody has a goofy weapon skin, I'll see that as I'm spectating and watching my teammates while they run around with it. So simply not buying content you don't like isn't necessarily the best way of addressing the problem. At the end of the day, there is a clear imbalance here of realistic to silly content. You can find Hawaiian skins and goofy headgears and clown masks, but there just isn't as many realistic options to pick from. Now, they did come out with some historical bundle packs a few months ago for headgears. Some of those were interesting, some of them were also silly. I mean, for every cool one that you had, like Thatcher's World War I gas mask and helmet, then you would also have Rook with his demented Pac-Man looking like he has rotted teeth and needs to go to the dentist. So really, this video isn't about like, hey, don't put goofy stuff in the game. Clearly, it's already there, like it or not, you have to accept it. Rather, the point of this is to say, let's address the imbalance of arcadey silly stuff to realistic tactical stuff. The community has kind of responded and said, wait a minute guys, we need more options here for the other side of the coin too. But we have no idea what kind of content this feedback will translate into. And for instance, they said that they had a meeting about it and they did ask for some examples. But that could be as far as it ever goes. Nothing may actually get created as a result of that. On the other hand, they may change their schedule of content release. Just because it hasn't come up on the store yet doesn't mean it's not already created. I'm sure there's lots of skins and headgear options that are just waiting to be released on the store. I'm sure some of it is goofy. Hopefully some of it is also realistic. They may adjust their timetable based on this. They released a lot of silly stuff kind of in short order right next to each other. That may cause them to reshuffle their priorities and move some things up ahead of other things to try to address this community request. Still, another option is maybe there wasn't really anything that's been created yet, and this may make them go to their art team and say, hey, design some models and some textures for us that reflect the kinds of things the community is asking for. If that's the case, I wouldn't necessarily expect to see anything in short order. Those assets take time to make if they need to be built from scratch, and we might continue to see the other things that they had already been building and working on coming out in between. So it might be a month or 2 months before we see a kind of response come up to this in the content that's made available. And as mentioned, there actually may be nothing that comes of this. We simply don't know. What we do know, though, is a lot of people voiced their concern about it, and it was heard and responded to. We'll just have to wait and see what the actual outcome winds up being. On the topic of cosmetics for headgears or weapon skins or whatever it may be, it is important to recognize that all of this stuff is completely optional. It's all kind of microtransactions that exist outside of the base game. None of it makes your gun better or your character model better. It's just completely aesthetic, right? It's down to the choice of just how do you want to customize your character. If you're interested in it enough, you'll pick it up. I think we just want to see things balanced out a little bit more. Now, if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe so you stay up to date on all the latest news, tips, tricks, walkthroughs, reviews, and more for Rainbow Six Siege. You can also follow me over at IcyCat25 on either Facebook or Twitter. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.